Welcome to Successful Parenting, where we, Jackie Rue and Robin Choquette, share practical skills for families to build resilience and healthy connections. As practicing professionals and parents ourselves, we hope this podcast is a resource for parents to grow, reflect, and learn more about themselves and their children. Our approach is simple, tangible, and most importantly, we lead with compassion for the integrity of the families we serve. This podcast should not be taken as medical advice and is intended for informational purposes only. We love our work and we can't wait to watch families gain confidence and open themselves up to new ways of successful parenting.
Hello, Robin. Good morning. How are you doing?
I am good. How are you today, Jackie?
I am. You know what? I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good. It's been it was a relaxing weekend, so I am ready to rock and roll. You know, I was laughing this morning thinking about a joke one of my clients this week told me, and it was
So tell me, no knock jokes.
no. One thing about us, Robin, we like to keep it light and fun in our parenting work because I think we have to always add humor. And my families know I like a good joke. And so this young lady who is she's a young adult, she came to me and she said, "Jackie, you're not going to believe this, but my boyfriend left me because of my anxiety." And I said, "Oh no, tell me about that." And she said, "But then I realized he just went to get a cup of coffee." And at first I was a little thrown off, and then I realized she was kind of she was joking, because so often our anxiety does trigger us to think, "Oh no, my boyfriend's going to leave me," or no. And then she's like, "He really just went out to get some coffee," and she was more laughing at herself, and I think I love the work we do because we so often laugh at ourselves, and we encourage all to find humor in just the small things day to day, even those things that are difficult, because I do think we have to sometimes be a little bit lighthearted.
Right. And I think it so much ties into what we're going to be talking about, because on this episode, we're going to be talking about, the benefits of anxiety. How is it helpful? Why we should embrace it. I really feel we need to shift and we need to start embracing it.
And I think, sometimes anxiety can be helpful. I know when we work with athletes, we talk about that a lot is, some anxiety can actually help performance.
Right.
But it is so true that anxiety, when we feel anxious, it often is that result of feeling like there's danger in our path. And although there may not be actual danger, anxiety can kind of set off alarms for us that can be very, very awakening. And so often it's based on that just fear, whether it's fear of the future, fear of failure, or even for me, a lot of times it's fear of embarrassing myself or making a mistake.
Right. And the fear is okay. It's when it starts getting that distortion, right? It doesn't equal the actual threat. Our perception is distorted.
Oh, absolutely. And we joke, words that we love to use when we're in an anxious state is, things like, "I can't do it. It's not going to work." In fact, I had a young girl in my office recently, and she was, I think, 9 years old, and she was feeling a lot of anxiety around test performance. So much so that she would become physically ill on days that there was going to be a test in the morning. It was really tough. And one of the things I noticed is I heard her mom refer to her as, "She's so bright, she's so bright." And the little girl really started to talk about how she felt that others had this expectation of her that she had to be perfect because she was so smart. And we really talked about how that's not necessarily the expectation. And she felt so much relief when she understood that it was okay for her, even though she was bright in some areas, to have some weaknesses and to have some areas of struggle. And so often we talk about, how we have a tendency to overuse certain labels. And even sometimes I'll even take it a step further that I think sometimes we even overuse the word anxiety. I had another teenager in my office, and the school had referred the teenager to me and said, "This teenager is really anxious and needs to work on his anxiety." And when I was interviewing the teen, he didn't really talk about anxiety as much as how difficult his home life was at the time. And he said, "Everyone calls me anxious, but I think I'm really sad that my parents are really talking about getting a divorce. He said, no one knows that. And I haven't talked about it at school because they just keep telling me I'm anxious because I'm having a hard time getting up in the morning.
Oh, wow. So interesting and so much insight for this young man to say, wait a minute, this is a label, but I don't feel that. That's not accurate to my internal senses of what's happening.
Well, and sometimes I think we can feel a lot of different things at once. And so while we're going to talk about anxiety today, I do want to just note that I think sometimes we got to be careful not to overuse the word because for a lot of our children, they're having a lot of different experiences going on. I think it's important to understand anxiety, but also to understand we don't want to label kids as this child's anxious or this is just anxiety when it's not usually
Right.
just something. It's usually a mix of a lot of different things, and everyone's experience is so different. I think we love to label, but really being mindful that we want to be true to the experience that our families are having, our children, our teens that we're working with are having. And so I've had to really take a step back when I'm doing this work and be mindful of the whole picture, not just the one aspect.
And I think that's that 360 of what's really happening. And I talk a lot with people about this. It's not just this one thing, it's that 360. And to be able to get that full picture, I think is really helpful to be able to service families in a way that can include everything or as much as you possibly can. Obviously, you can't know everything, but really trying to understand that and helping them to see it in a different way. That's a lot of kind of what we're talking about today.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm excited to explore a little bit more about, this idea that anxiety can be normal and natural and it is part of who we are. We all experience feelings of anxiety at different times and I love how you talk about this.
Yeah, I talk a lot about it, especially with talking out in performance side and helping my clients there of really embracing it. I volunteer with a semi-pro team here in the Kansas area during the summer, and there was I say young, I mean, it was an adult, and we were talking about her anxiety, and I helped her really kind of shift it because she wanted to get away from it. And I kept saying, this is what you need. And as she stopped fighting her anxiety and accepted it, she said, I can manage it so much better of utilizing it when I need it and then allowing it to kind of go away, the beginning, middle, and an end, right? With emotions, she was able to manage it. And the thing that really helped her is when I started talking about this is an evolutionary process. This is what we need to survive. So let's not try to eliminate it.
Absolutely. And I've even had to learn that for myself is there are certain times where before a performance, whether, for me, sometimes I like to do like running races or I like to give presentations and I know before I'm going to have some anxiety, right? And because I've been presenting for so long, my anxiety is pretty low before a presentation. But when I have a running race coming up, I typically really can get in my head and a lot of what if I can't do this? What if I'm not ready? What if I fall apart? And so I've really had to work on being mindful about those are just thoughts and they're not necessarily reflective of anxiety. And for myself in those moments, I really try to just kind of ground myself in my five senses and just take a moment just to be and trust the process that I am where I'm meant to be and I have prepared. And as you know, I am one that tends to prepare, which is interesting that even though we may be prepared, we may still experience self-doubt. I also like to reflect back on those times that, I have done difficult things before and remind myself that even though things are difficult, I can still manage. And a lot of times that helps relieve my anxiety.
Right. And I think the thing being is, and you said this, Jackie, it was so true, is if we can ground ourselves and allow the anxiety to be what it needs to be, and we can manage the thoughts that are there, that anxiety actually helps us to organize, what's going on around us. It's when it moves into that overdrive is where you start to see cognitive shifting and changing. But when we can ground and be there, the anxiety helps us to be able to get things and to understand what we need to respond to and what we don't need to respond to. And if we have that conscious effort of being able to be in the moment, and I love what you said, I use my five senses, different things to be and to ground.
Well, and I think for me, at least, it takes practice, and
Right.
I always remind myself as well as others when we're doing new things and taking on new strategies to practice when we're feeling a little bit calm or maybe just a lower level of anxiety. You don't want to practice these skills when you're really, really anxious because you may experience frustration and it really does take some time. But one thing I'm trying to do is just recognize when I have a thought, is it a thought that's reflective of anxiety or is it a rational thought? And if it is a thought reflective of anxiety, I try to ground myself in those five senses as well as maybe looking at a piece of evidence.
So true. And I love what you said is that I can look at the facts and I can ground myself, and then we can honor that intuitive part. And that's what the anxiety is, right? That's that intuitive part for us to be able to read and have a clear understanding of what's going on. We can respond in a way to survive. Now, that was a long time ago, but now what it does is it helps us to be able to be at our best when we want to be there. And it helps us to really be able to understand, where we can take those risks, where we need to be safe in our decisions and focus on the things that we need to do well.
Well, I think that's so true, right? You think about if you were to have no anxiety, you would be probably pretty low energy and
Mhm.
even tired. I would be concerned if, even with like the start of the school year, if I had a child that the first day school was coming and they just kind of show no no real excitement or anxiety, if they just kind of were, we want to have some because that helps us get like you said, that sweet spot, our adrenaline going a little bit. It really is about just learning to manage it. But I think when we become anxious and we experience, as we've talked about, those physical symptoms, they can really trigger our thoughts. And if we don't practice some of this, it really can, really exasperate the anxiety, almost, giving that adrenaline rush. And if we don't have a handle on it, it make us feel overwhelmed rather than in that zone or in that sweet spot as you've discussed. And I think that is just so true.
It's really about changing the narrative of anxiety and what we think about it and how it helps us to reach our fullest potential. Thinking about battling and trying, like I said about, this young lady, rid herself of anxiety. When she was doing that, I said, how often do you think on the field you're not able to clearly see what's happening when you're playing because you're in a battle with trying to rid yourself of anxiety? And she said that was probably the thing that shifted for her. Obviously, understanding it and then being able to not battle that anxiety.
It's interesting. You just made me think about something. I would love at some point to, hear from some more parents on this. But a lot of the parents that I've talked to recently have said that when their children become anxious, that the parents interpret that the children cannot handle whatever it is that they're anxious about. And I love the change the narrative because when children are anxious, it doesn't mean that they cannot handle what they're anxious about. It
Right.
means they're anxious about it. And I think, when we shift the narrative as parents and move from this child can't handle this because they're anxious to this child's anxious but can handle it, and we really relay that to the child, it does change the narrative. And our children look to us to read what the narrative is through our reactions and body language.
I love this, Jackie. You keep saying and talking about that confidence. And what we know is that, and there's research out there that shows this, in the American Psychological Association in 2019 at the convention, they actually had a presentation and they talked about this very thing is that anxiety can help build resilience. And when I say that to parents, they're like, wait, what? Like, yeah, this helps us because we're able to kind of stretch ourselves, talk about, feeling outside of that comfort zone. We're able to move towards building our skills and our abilities because we're stepping out and we're challenging ourselves. And the more that we do that, the stronger we get, the more confidence we have, the more resilient, and we start facing new difficulties. So it becomes this loop of building resilience And I think if we can start thinking of anxiety and resilience together in that way, oh my gosh, parents maybe will stop fighting it and trying to help, the child avoid it.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that's so great about the work we do is day in and day out working with families on this. And it really does, it's interesting. Some of the families I've worked with that really do have a relationship with anxiety that is at times overwhelming. Really, I see that they have, so many other skills that don't get tapped into because they focus on that avoidance. And really a lot of the teens I work with that we've been talking about anxiety this week really do have a lot of leadership skills. And when they start to get
Mhm.
confident, it's so awesome just to see them take off. I had a teenager recently, Robin, and you and I have spoken about her. She's one of our favorites, but this was a young lady that was really paralyzed by anxiety and was fearful of driving and was fearful of, trying new situations. And it was awesome because all of a sudden one day she took a step and she went out and she got her license. And she was so shocked that she was able to handle this that she then turned around and tried to get a job because she's like, well, if I could get my license, which I never thought I could, then maybe I could get a job. Well, she went and got a job, was so excited she got the job, that then turned around and did something else. And it was so funny that her narrative started to shift from, I really can't handle a lot, to, wow, I can really try new things. And the more new things she tried, she would get excited. And it's like, as she went from, now this is not always the case, but when we start to look at ourselves differently, we start to react and engage differently with the world around us.
So true. Love to hear those stories. And it just makes you smile. I'm sure our listeners are the same place we are. Like, this big smile comes on my face to hear this young lady talk about it. And that is the truth that we know in leadership. If you can be empathetic, which people who experience anxiety, research has shown, are more empathetic because they understand. The anxiety helps us to look at multiple outcomes. If we're grounded and we're in that space, we're able to look at all different things. And so if you think about someone in leadership and you're in the middle of a crisis and you need someone that leads and manages that situation, someone that can look at multiple outcomes, pretty good skill to have. And I think it's so important is that, healthy anxiety really is very productive. It's helpful. It's resourceful. And changing the narrative of embracing anxiety, I think, will make a difference in many of our families' lives.
Oh, that is so true. And I like the points that we discussed today. I think it's something that we're gonna be talking about as we move on. But I know one of our goals is helping our families, develop that closeness, but also developed, to be the best that they can be in whatever area that is that they're looking for.
True, true, true. I think we are wrapping it up. Another one done.
Yes, and I am super excited I'm not going to ruin the surprise, but I'm super excited for our next week's episode. But I just hope everybody has a great day and finds these tips helpful. And please, definitely, if you do, feel free to like us and share on our page. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Bye, Jackie.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us, and make sure to subscribe and like us to catch our next episode, where we will take you on a journey to find new ways of successful parenting.